everybody, good afternoon and welcome back to this inspir'em webinar on champions, on our champion series. Today we're going to be joined by the amazing Lisa Occleshaw. She's going to be talking to us about champion building. Before we do, just a couple of housekeeping items from me. So the way that these sessions work, if you haven't been on one of these before, is that we'll do a Q&A with our guest and we'll be talking about a particular subject. Today we're talking about champion building. If you do have questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat or put them in the Q&A. We'll be monitoring those and we'll be looking to see if we can answer as many questions as we can today. If we don't get through all the questions, what we will do is we'll follow up with you afterwards. A couple of quick plugs from us on things that are coming down over the next few weeks to look out for. So after this webinar today, we've got 2 others left in the series. We have got Getting from Champion to Economic Buyer, and we've got Using Champion in a Closing Process. So Champion to Economic Buyer, we're joined in 2 weeks by Doug Myhills from SAP Concur. He'll be talking to us about that subject. And then later on, we'll be talking about the sort of using champions with closed plans. That'll be the end of the series. If you do miss any of the webinars that we do, they will be available on the platform on record, so you can listen back to those anytime. And one final plug for me, which Lucy will put some details on, hopefully in the chat, which I've not mentioned to her, so she's now going to kill me for mentioning that, is our Women in Sales webinar series returns in July of this year, and it came out in the newsletter this week. So there is a link for registration. The webinar series is free to join. So if you'd like to join us for that on the 1st of July, which is the first in the series, then please feel free to register. Well, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Lisa for joining us today. Hey, Lisa, how you doing?
I'm very, very well. Thank you very much. Yeah, good to be here.
Excellent. Well, let's start off with, could you give us a little potted history of you, your background, and what gives you some credentials in talking about champion building?
Oh, I think just because I've been around a long time. Fortunately, I don't look as old as I am. But yeah, I've been sales director for the UK and Ireland at Ping for nearly 4.5 years now. Can't believe that. Prior to that, as you know, I was at SAP, and prior to that, 20 years at IBM in sales and sales leader roles. So I've been in the industry a long time, not always selling the same technology, but basically trying to be successful, trying to help my teams be successful, which is certainly what I've been doing for the last 10, 15 years. So champions are vital. That's my kind of statement on the topic, definitely.
Absolutely. Well, today we're going to be talking about building champions. We have previously talked about identifying them, but if we need to jump around, that's absolutely fine. So let's kick off with the importance of building champions. And maybe if you've got any stories of where that's gone well or where that hasn't gone well, what's the material difference it makes when you build a champion?
Yeah, I think certainly what I've seen with teams over the last few years is people mistake a coach for a champion. So they have someone in that organization, whether it's an existing customer or prospect, who's giving them a bit of information, and they have their happy ears on and they think that this is 100% truth and everyone is going to support you in your sale. The difference with the champion, of course, is that they have influence and they have power in there and they have credibility in their own organization, which means that they can actually affect real change and real support for you in your sales cycle. So one of the things I've seen recently is to have a really good champion. Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it's not in the first deal that you've built that champion relationship, but it is about a personal alignment, you helping them as well as them helping you. And it's about supporting what they're trying to achieve in the business. That often gets a champion on board with you. One of the things I will say, which was just a great example recently, the largest bank in the UK is one of our customers. We had a very, very tricky renewal recently, very hard negotiators, as you can imagine. We have a champion in there who will text me, ring me at weekends, text the account exec on there, ring them at weekends, and have very open conversations about, first of all, what we need to do, but also where he can help. So he really does bring us all along. And he promised that if we got this over the line in April, he would do something nice for us. And it was completely bizarre, but he sent the 2 of us a video of him singing My Way completely straight to camera. And I thought, okay, well, that's an unusual way of proving the relationship. But if you've got a relationship with a champion where they will do something that's a little bit funky and allow you to have it on video,
Yeah, yeah.
you've probably done well.
Well, yeah, absolutely. The fact that they're trusting you with a crazy bit of video
Yeah,
footage,
yeah,
that's amazing. Oh, very
yeah.
good. So, interesting that you talk about sort of champions taking a while to develop. That's certainly one of the things that we see is that people feel like they've identified a champion on a first date. This person is the person, and we're booking a church before we've even had a few dates. It's really important to be thinking about the sort of building the champion, and it is a series of actions. It's a maturity thing that's required.
Yeah.
Have you got any great stories about how people have built, you've seen people build champions, and you've thought, actually, yeah, what a great way to really build that relationship with a champion? Any examples?
Yeah, actually, it makes me feel old saying this, but the good old-fashioned face-to-face with your champion. So, and often not talking about business. Oh, actually, do you know what? I'm in the area. Can we grab a coffee? Then we're going to be doing some events. I'd really appreciate your input about what you find attractive about events. Getting there, making them feel important and that what they think is important to you and might help you set your strategy for your account, your territory, or whatever. But that isn't putting them under pressure. I mean, literally seen a sales cycle where we think we have a champion at the beginning. We try to talk to them to get a little bit of intel, immediately slapped down by either the EB or procurement or whoever else in the cycle. But then once you've built some trust, you've done something for them, you've shown that you're supportive, you're not the evil salesperson trying to rip them off, you gain a bit of trust, and then that develops into a champion, perhaps the next deal round. But it is about putting in the time and it's about being invested in the person. What is important to them? How can actually what you do, how can you help them? How can you get them to be engaged? Exec alignment's a great thing to do. If they can show that they can get the vendor CEO on the phone to have a conversation with them or their leadership, that often helps as well.
Yeah, I think, like you say, I mean, so old-fashioned or not, it's the reality. Face-to-face is still very important. You get so much more out of a face-to-face meeting that, that is how humans, we build relationships for sure. But I think also old-fashioned flattery, like you say, can I have your advice? Can I get your expertise? Can I get your opinion? People
Yeah,
love that. They absolutely love to want to feel wanted, feel part of a tribe. So that's a really great,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So can I ask though, so one of the things that we get asked quite a lot, is many of the businesses that we work with are operating through partners. And partner ecosystems are very challenging, and often that means that we don't get access to necessarily the people who need to be the champions for the deal as such, because we've got a partner that's in the way. Have you got any reflections that you've had on champion building, how you approach champion building when there is a channel-based sale?
Yeah, and actually, we it varies depending on the type of partner. So, as you know, in our business, we deal with the GSIs, but we also deal with boutique identity partners who very much focus around the kind of technology that we sell. Those guys often want to be a team. They actually want to get to the EBs. They want to get to the power. They would rather work with us to do that. So, going in as a joint team approach, it is good and works. It takes a little bit of time, but it always takes time to really get to the EB. The SIs are more difficult. The SIs, especially because they've probably got a much bigger contract. We are a tiny part of that relationship, and often they are a blocker. I mean, they're a blocker to all sorts. It
Mm.
varies by SIs, and I've had some good and bad experience in the last couple of years. Again, it's almost about the flattery and the treating the SI as your champion as a stakeholder and going to them. Some of my best reps will have regular meetings with their counterpart from an SI without actually talking about the account. They're talking about the industry, about their advice and well, what's your experience? What are you seeing? Let me take you
Mhm.
for lunch. You've almost got to treat them as a separate champion, a separate EB and cajole them. But it is more difficult with SIs, much more.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just remind everybody, if you've got any questions for Lisa today, feel free to pop them in the chat and we'll try and get to them momentarily. But I think yeah, absolutely around the partner side of things. I think we have to understand that they are a customer in themselves. They
Yeah,
have needs and wants, and frankly, they have choice as well.
absolutely.
So depending on the relationship, what you really want to do is you want to make sure that they are your champion and that they're gunning for you. You've got something to gain there, but also they're doing the right things by the customer as well. I think also when we think about the SIs, we forget that usually the request that comes into us is not from the account team, and they're the ones that really have the need. So it's very similar to when we deal with large organizations, is really thinking about who the true end customer is and what's the chain of decision making that's sort of going on, getting as
That's a
many people in.
That's a really important point because I see it a lot where the cyber teams, those people that are responsible for our type of technology, they want to engage with us all over the place. They absolutely want to work with us. They almost have a separate job themselves trying to get into the industry teams that own the account relationships. So it is complicated, and I've seen good and bad.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So work to be done there. It always sounds like it's a lot of work, but again, I think like you've sort of alluded to earlier, right? Careers are long, right? If we're in sales, we're going to be in it for a long time. It's worth spending the time building those relationships because it's amazing how many of those come back round. We actually had a dinner this week. Actually, it was quite funny. There was somebody that sat two seats down from me, and he'd worked with somebody else two seats down 20 years ago, and they hadn't actually seen each other since then. So careers are long. It's
Yeah.
definitely worth building those relationships. So key stages then where you think, champion building has to be the primary objective or key parts of the sales cycle where you think champion building has to be front of mind. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think especially if you're engaging with a brand new prospect, it's a new opportunity. You need to try and get to as many people as possible. And I say this to my team all the time, just about managing influence in their accounts. I have this double digit relationships. You need to be talking to as many as you can, and you have to get to know them. And it is an investment in time. You need to try and build a champion. As I say, from my perspective, if it's a brand new prospect, you won't have a champion in that first deal. You need to build trust. You need to earn your stripes. You need to deliver on what you say you're going to deliver. Because there's one thing that really annoys people is if you don't do that, and trying to understand what their priorities are. And then, do you know what? Just maybe when that goes live, when they're successful, they have a good deployment, then you're building a real champion because someone's got experience of you and they know you can trust, you can be trusted.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my longest standing champions in the industry. I remember talking to him about a deal that I did with him when I was in my early 20s and reflecting on it in my 40s. I said, why did you do that deal? And he said, because you did everything I asked you to do. And actually, I knew that I could trust you, and therefore I knew that there was a relationship there that we would both get the outcome. So
Yeah.
yeah, really important in doing that. So yeah, absolutely. So just a question then that's come in from, so it's coming from one of our team. Of course, it's coming from Laura because you know Laura well. Laura has said, what role does a sales leader play in the role of champion building and access to the economic buyer using their champion?
Yeah, I consider it my job to be supporting my team to get to champions and to get to economic buyers because they can use me as, I don't feel particularly important. I'm a first line sales manager at the end of the day, but my team can use my director title to say, well, I'm going to bring Lisa on the call and she can help get some of the things that you need. And then together we can support you in there. So I think it's vital that you try and get your target champion to feel as important as possible and to get the attention they need. So I'm fortunate as well that my sales leader, I can get him on any customer call and give him, look, this is the brief I need you to do, and he's there to support that. It's really important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think within that, I think there's a really key point around, I think when we're thinking about champion building, we think it as almost a service-based relationship where the customer asks for something, we give them the service. We have to remember that we have the opportunity to use that as leverage. So if the
Yeah,
customer says to us, well, it would really help us if we could have this, this, and this from you, even if it's in your gift to give, it doesn't mean to say you need to give it. It means
no,
you can create some theatre, make it look like it's a tricky thing, but then an opportunity to introduce in another leader or whoever it is.
absolutely.
Yeah. I
Absolutely.
imagine orchestrating the theatre is a big part of the role.
Totally. And if you believe what I say to everyone, I am on calls with the CFO every night, trying to justify getting something, which of course I can actually give anyway. But yeah, it is about showing that you're making some effort to get them something that they need.
Absolutely. So, Oscar, when you're doing our social media clips, don't put that on social media because all of Lisa's customers will know that she's just lying about the leverage that she's trying to get for that particular customer.
Embellishing, not lying, embellishing. Yeah.
Yeah, slightly embellishing. Yeah, just don't let the truth get in the way of a good story for sure. Absolutely. So, what about tips for champion building then? So, maybe if we think about tips for champion building, particularly when feel like they're really struggling to build relationships, what do you think?
Yeah, it's hard. And it is about putting the time in. And sometimes it is about aligning with them, finding something which is common ground, whether it's on a professional level or on a personal level. Again, old-fashioned approach, but knowing where someone's kids go to school or who's at university or what subject they're doing, and just having human relationships with them. You're trying to persuade this person that they're going to spend a huge amount of money on what you sell and that it's credible for them to do that. And they need to trust you to do it. So it is about trying to align. The one thing I would say at the moment is certainly in our industry, we are rife with RFPs and processes which are owned by procurement. And that makes champion building even more difficult than it already is. And as I say, that's why I think in the first deal of an engagement, you might not get a champion, but you've got to invest the time to build the relationships and build the trust and talk to them on a human level. These are all people that we're dealing with.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned about those procurement points. And I will just remind people if you want to put a question in the chat, feel free to do so. The thing about the procurement ownership as well is, we've been talking about this a lot this week. We've got 5 or 6 companies that have asked us a specific question this week. The Our biggest piece of advice is whilst you absolutely have to have friends in procurement, again, they are not the people that are driving those relationships and driving the end user need. And also as well, the account teams, particularly in the partner situations, they will have had several meetings with the end users. So you're weeks behind information and insights. So if
Yeah.
you are just trying to deal with procurement people, that's very difficult. Inbound RFPs are tricky.
Yeah.
One of our customers was actually talking about this week about using an inbound RFP as an opportunity to go and seek C-suite relationships and saying that you won't bid. Have you ever done that before? Have you ever used that tactic and tried to leverage some relationships?
Yeah, totally. Actually, on a very large account, when I was back in the IBM days, we had done RFP after RFP after RFP and never been selected. I had a theory that the person who was making the decision had been turned down for a job at IBM previously, and he was pathological about it. And actually, at the time, we had something like the sixth RFP in every quarter. The final one came in, and I said, "No, we're not bidding." And they were, what do you mean? What do you mean you're not bidding? We can't have IBM not bid for this. And I said, when we're not bidding, you've got all the information. You don't need anything else. You're not going to choose us. This takes a huge amount of time and effort. We're not bidding. And it got escalated. And I don't think the guy got fired, but he didn't stay actually much longer after that. And they did start to do some business with us. But you have to make a stand. There
Yeah.
is I don't mean to be kind of rude about this, but we have a choice about the customers that we engage with as well. And I think there's a lot of professional respect about being in sales that gets missed, especially when you are dealing with procurement people, because they want you to feel like you're a commodity, both as a person and as a product, whatever you're selling. So,
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes you do have to say, not bidding.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell this story a lot. When I was working on the Royal Bank of Scotland years ago, we were very close to the Royal Bank. I was working for Sun, and they issued an RFP that we knew that was coming that we completely disagreed with. We knew their architecture well, we knew their direction of travel, and we had recommendations. They issued an RFP and we declined to bid. And I remember I was very young, and I had a very angry Tony Stennett, who's the CIO of the Royal Bank at the time, of the investment bank. And he phoned me and he said, "What the hell are you playing at?" And I said, "We understand what you're looking for. This is the wrong answer. And let's tell you why it's the wrong answer. You've gone out to 8 companies. That's very expensive. You need to stop this RFP." And they did. And actually he listened and respected the opinion. He went and spoke to his teams, and then all of the vendors that played nicely together got in a room. So you have a choice.
Yeah,
Absolutely have a
yeah,
choice.
definitely.
But let's just focus then for a second, before we sort of start thinking about summing up about what happens when you reach that some of those difficult moments, like some of the things as sales leaders that we've heard before. Oh, that person won't meet me face to face because, or the teams are dispersed. If you're dealing with a JP Morgan, those teams are dispersed globally, so therefore if we're going to have that meeting, we cannot have that meeting face to face. What would your advice or tactics that you've seen before, what would that be?
So the one thing I always try and say to them then is, okay, we can do it remotely, but could I please invite you to have your cameras on? Because it's this hiding behind a name on a screen, you're never going to build rapport like that at all. So my view is, okay, don't mind, we can compromise, we can have a remote call. Can I please invite you to have your cameras on? Because I want to look into your eyes. I want you to look into mine. We need to try and build a connection if we're going to be a partner. The one overused word by a lot of customers with me is they want to be a partner. And that only applies when they want something, and it isn't about when there's a tricky situation. And I'll tell that story to customers. Maybe it's an age thing. Maybe it's because my mortgage is paid off. I don't know. But I am quite happy to risk a little bit of discomfort by saying to a customer, come on, you say partnership, but actually it never works when I need something from you. So let's work on this together and actually build it. And you do have difficult conversations with them, but it's all about that human level.
Yeah. And I think as well, like you say, sometimes it's about taking a little bit of a risk in that dialogue. One of the things that we see quite a lot in US teams, particularly, again, because US teams, even if you're dealing with a small company, often you're dealing with quite dispersed teams. There is definitely a, remote culture, getting people to switch on the cameras, really useful, but also trying to put a stake in the ground into who the most important people are and go
Yeah,
to their offices and say, can we offer that? Can we do this as hybrid? We'll come to your offices, we'll sit with you, we'll broadcast to the rest of the team. And if you get it wrong and you've picked the wrong person, then you might get lucky enough that you've got a coach and they tell you a little bit about what's going on. They might fill your org chart in for you. There's no downside to doing
yeah,
that, for sure. It's really
absolutely right.
important, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Great. So any final tips that you've got on the champion building side? Anything that we haven't covered that you think actually my number one suggestion, or even maybe a sales leadership suggestion on champion building?
Yeah, I think the most important thing actually is to not give up. And like I said, the number of relationships is really important. We had one a year or so ago where we had an RFP process. My rep tried to build a champion relationship and test the champion and was immediately slapped down by procurement. Don't go around me, don't go around the process. And actually, before the end of that sales cycle, which we did win and we signed, and just before we needed to test again, completely different reaction then because we'd gone through, we'd kept faith with them, we'd built credibility, we'd built the credibility with the technology. And then the champion was able to say, okay, yeah, I get what you mean. Let me take that away and see if I can fix it. And he did. So even in a single sales cycle, you can make a change. Don't give up. And also be a bit more, have a bit of humility and say, sorry, I hope I haven't overstepped, but this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get to a point where we're partners in this together.
Mm.
People will accept that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting you say about the humility point because I think also um, we sometimes do worry about tenacity versus boundaries. You can get away with it with a little bit of humility as well, but also you have got to have some EQ about champion building. I mean, I have seen some amazing champion building before where I think if customers understood the boundaries that had been crossed, they might not have been champions in the end, but you've got to do your research, but you've also got to be respectful of these people as well, which is just really important, particularly when you're dealing with super senior people in banks and SIs and
Absolutely.
yeah, absolutely great. Well, that's been absolutely amazing to talk to you today, Lisa. And so some key things that I've sort of taken away from the session today. I think probably the biggest one is the don't give up. I suppose our job in sales and as sales leaders is to go build champions. We won't get deals done without champions for sure. So we have to go find them. And even if, we're struggling to do that, we've got to keep come up with new ways of doing it. I always say get the crayons out and get imaginative and try and think of a new way. So really important that we keep doing that. Well, great. So thanks very much for joining us today. And so to everybody that's on the webinar today, if you've got any questions for us after this, then please do drop us a line. Otherwise, we'll see you in a couple of weeks where we'll be talking about getting from champion to economic buyer with Doug Myhill. And we'll look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks very much.